Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 107 of Humanity Rising. Virtually every day since the 22nd of May, Ubiquity University and over 300 partnering organizations from all over the world have come together to create essentially a daily open space so that people from all over the world can come together to share their experiences as to how they're navigating through this extraordinary pandemic, which has put virtually the whole world under some form of lockdown, social distancing, an acute awareness and concern about personal and public health, and deepening questions about the viability of the institutions that have undergirded the world for centuries, and how we can work together to ensure that the world beyond the pandemic is more sustainable and healthy and resilient and in alignment with natural systems. So we've come together to share our experiences, to share solutions that we can scale, that can make a difference, to confer on how we can increase our strategic effectiveness. And we are delighted, we're honored by the thousands of people that join us every day, the hundreds of organizations. We have over 40 live streaming partners that are on a daily basis broadcasting Humanity Rising through their network. So we're very deeply appreciative for everything that everyone has contributed to making Humanity Rising the success that it has become. We're in a world of chaos, which we'll be discussing today, and how we can engage in what we're going to be calling radical regeneration, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, as we always do, we want to start the session today with just a moment of heart coherence. It's crazy out there. Nothing makes sense. The centrifugal force of chaos preys upon us virtually every moment of every day. And we have to compensate for that by deepening our coherence, not only as a community, but personally. So for the next 60 seconds or so, close your eyes and maybe put your hand on your heart. Pay attention to your heartbeat, the spirit of gratitude. Connect your heart with everyone on this call and people of goodwill everywhere. Thank you, everyone. Heart coherence may be the most important thing we can do under current circumstances. And I hope you do it multiple times a day. And now I'd like to introduce our poet laureate for Humanity Rising, Kim Rosen. Kim?
Thank you so much, Jim. I am so grateful to be with you here today, especially with Andrew and Carolyn, who we will be hearing and receiving from. I've been looking forward to this a long time. Poetry is prayer, and prayer is poetry. Every great scripture is written in poetry, which means it's not only working through the words and the cognitive sense, it's working through the body, through the rhythms, through the sounds, and through something uncanny that's encrypted between the words. And I have the great joy today of speaking two poems translated by Andrew Harvey. The first is a poem of the iconoclastic 15th century Indian mystical poet Kabir. And the second is a poem from our friend Rumi, who was writing in the 13th century.
Kim, you're a little low. If you could bring your volume up.
Oh, okay. Not sure why that is. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, just low.
Yeah. How odd. Okay, sorry. Let me just double check. Everything's good. Okay. How odd. Okay, so I've turned it all the way up. Not sure why that would be happening. How is this? Is this better?
Yeah, that's better, Kim. Thanks.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, everybody. So I'm speaking two poems today, one by Kabir, translated by Andrew Harvey, and the other by Rumi, translated by Andrew Harvey. They will be two pieces of music that the first is by Helen Jane Long, and the second is by Gary Malkin. Love's hurricane has come. The whirlwind of knowledge has arrived. My thatched roof of delusion has been flung to the four directions. My hut of illusion so carefully crafted has come careening down. Its two posts of duality have crashed to the ground. Its rafters of desire have been split by lightning. Thunderbolts have collapsed all its eaves of greed. Its big stone jar of evil habits has smashed in a million pieces. With contemplation and clear devotion, the holy ones have rebuilt my roof. It is strong and unmoving now, and never leaks or drips. When lies and deceit ran out of my body's house, I realized the Lord in all his splendor. Rain came down in torrents. After the wild storm, torrents of divine love drenched me, my body and soul. Then, O Kabir, the sun soared out, the sun of glory, the sun of realization, and darkness was dissolved forever. With contemplation and clear devotion, the holy ones have rebuilt my roof. It is strong and unmoving now, and never leaks or drips. When lies and deceit ran out of my body's house, I realized the Lord. Love's hurricane has come. The whirlwind of knowledge has arrived. My thatched roof of delusion has been flung to the four directions. My hut of illusion, so carefully crafted, has come careening down. Its two posts of duality have crashed to the ground. Its rafters of desire have been split by lightning. With contemplation and clear devotion, the holy ones have rebuilt my roof, drenched me, body and soul. O Kabir, the sun soared out, the sun of glory, the sun of realization, and darkness dissolved forever. How long will you move backwards? Come forward. Don't stray towards disbelief. Come to yourself. In grief, see gentleness. Come towards gentleness. Return at last to the origin of your own origin. Although you may seem to be a child of earth, you are the child of the pearls of certainty, the faithful guardian of the treasure of divine life. Return at last to the origin of your own origin. When you have tied yourself to detachment from yourself, know you'll be sprung free of your I and escape that prison with its 1,000 traps. Return at last to the origin of your own origin. You of your own origin. Although this world still holds you in its thrall, in your heart, you are a hidden treasure. Open now your inner eyes, the eyes of love. Return at last to the origin of your own origin. Although this world still holds you in its thrall, in your heart, you are a hidden treasure. Open your inner eyes. Now, the eyes of love. Return at last to the origin of your own origin. A poem by Kabir, translated by Andrew Harvey from his amazing book, Turn Me to Gold, and a poem by Rumi, also translated by Andrew Harvey, called The Origin of Your Origin. Music by Helen Jane Long and Gary Malkin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. Beautiful and serene as always. As we commence our dialogue today with Andrew Harvey and Carolyn Baker, who are both scholars and mystics, and I would say public intellectuals, people who think and speak to all of us as the world unfolds. I think it's important that we take note of the current situation as it's rapidly developing, particularly in the United States today. As you know, just about every day I try to provide updates on various aspects of the ecology and politics, the pandemic. But I think there's something happening now in the United States that is increasingly troubling, increasingly public, and which we need to take into account. I hope all of you saw some aspects of the presidential debate on Tuesday night, which descended into chaos as Donald Trump interrupted Joe Biden. I think the count was 78 times, and demonstrated a dimension of bullying and disregard to simple human civility that has never been demonstrated in the history of politics in America for the last 250 years since our birth as a nation. He openly celebrated white supremacy with his endorsement of the Proud Boys, as they're called. He openly derided the electoral process by declaring that the election was going to be a fraud. He misrepresented the truth on the pandemic. And he made obvious to everybody his intent to subvert the upcoming presidential election, throw the whole situation into the courts, eventually coming to the Supreme Court, which he is in the process of packing, as you all know, given the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Humanity Rising emerged out of the pandemic, an unprecedented global situation where, for the first time in human history, virtually everyone everywhere has been forced to undergo the duress of the coronavirus that, as of a few days ago, has claimed the lives of over 1 million people around the world in the last 6 months. In the United States, 4% of the human population, because of the complete incompetence of the Trump administration, the denial of science, the refusal to engage in simple hygienic procedures such as wearing masks, actually fomenting protests against any restrictions. 4% of the human population has over 20% of the COVID cases and over 20% of the COVID deaths. And just as the nation is reeling from that, Trump goes for the jugular of the American Republic, the democratic process itself, and states clearly on multiple occasions, as many of you have been observing, that he does not intend to honor or accept the democratic results of the election, and intends to ensure the continuity, he says, of his own administration indefinitely into the future. He's worked with the Postmaster General, a man that he appointed to basically subvert the US Postal Service at a time during the pandemic when more and more people were wanting to vote by mail. So we're heading in the United States into effectively a coup d'etat. And as you all know who were on the program a couple of days ago, Shelley Alcorn and I laid out this danger to democracy. And the most concise way that I can frame it is that if you just imagine the death of democracy in America and the reverberative effects that that would have around the world to strengthen authoritarian regimes, to strengthen the surveillance national security states that are implied by the capacity now to monitor every communication by everybody everywhere and to put it in permanent storage. You have a catastrophe that I believe is greater than the pandemic. And I state it as boldly as that. What's unfolding in the United States right now, as Donald Trump tries to kill democracy, is more dangerous than the pandemic. We'll get over the pandemic sooner or later. But if we snuff out the oldest continuously democratic country in the history of the world, as imperfect as that is, we're going to do damage to the global sinews of world culture from which we may never recover. So today's dialogue with Andrew, Harvey, and Carolyn Baker could not be more timely. They've just written a book which is being published over the next 2 weeks on radical regeneration. How under this current circumstance of deepening darkness, we can create islands of coherence, regenerative, radically informed islands of regenerative coherence that can ensure that we stay sane, that we stay in community, and that if the gods grace us, can actually turn this thing around because we're running out of time. And what we have now worked through, my friends, to get through the pandemic and get through this assault on democracy is a staggering challenge. So, Andrew and Carolyn, I want to welcome you. And I would love to just hear from both of you your comments on what I've said in the current world situation and why radical regeneration is now the watchword of the hour.
What you have said is nothing less than the most helpful kind of truth that we all need to face. I've been reading the comments while you've been speaking, and people have had the audacity and craziness to suggest that what you're doing is fomenting fear by even mentioning this dreadful possibility. My friends, denial is not going to help you. You have to find the spiritual courage to face exactly what is happening, because that is our only hope of rising up in the guided and sacredly empowered ways that will give us the stamina and the precision and the courage and the passion and the truth to change this situation. I have had it with the deniers. Because what is emerging in America isn't only a coup d'etat, the death of democracy. It is something even more frightening, something that Carolyn and I wrote about in Savage Grace, the third of our books, which now is completed by Radical Regeneration, the quartet that we've done. And in Savage Grace, which was written in the first year of Trump's ascendancy, we proclaim clearly that the greatest danger facing humanity was the birth of American fascism out of the rubbling of American democracy. American fascism is already amongst us, and if it gets its power established, it will make German and Russian fascism look like a tea party in a French orchard, because it will have the media behind it, the corporations behind it, massive surveillance behind it, a totally despotic, brutal ideology behind it, and it will set going movement that can destroy the planet fast. So stop denying this truth and get brave enough to plunge into the depths of authentic spiritual practice, where you will discover two things which our book is dedicated to. The first thing that you'll discover if you really do the work is that there is something in you that cannot be defeated, because it has never been born and it will never die. It is your essential self. The second thing that you will discover if you read authentic mystical texts and authentic mystical traditions is that there is a path to divinization that has been known for thousands of years. And this path always passes through a great death, a death of the false self to birth the real self, a death that is called fana, annihilation in Sufism, called the dark night in Christianity. And what we are now living through, my friends, is nothing less than a global dark night, which is here to either annihilate us or transfigure us, because quite clearly, as we are now, we are totally incapable of dealing with the tragic, horrific crises that our hubris and our madness and our addiction and our greed have created. This is not terrifying news for those who know the savage grace that is the dark night. But what is absolutely essential in a real dark night is two things. And this is what our book is dedicated to. And then I'm going to hand it to Karen. You must know the map and have an authentic map, not the new age garbage, the popcorn that's been sold in the corrupt capitalist bazaar of this debased spirituality, but the real map, the map of Kabir and Jesus and Rumi, the map that is proclaimed by these two lines of Rumi: the grapes of my body can only become wine after the winemaker tramples me. You have to realize that there is a death before you if you're sincere. And the second thing that's really important is to understand that your only hope in a global dark night is to dive deeply into the structures of this dark night and realize for yourself that all these structures of chaos and anxiety and terror and the unmasking of evil have in their very nature their opposite, which is calling to you to align yourself with humbly and passionately, so as to be able to birth a new kind of human being, which with grace and with divine blessing and coming together in Humanity Rising, we can still create a new divine human reality out of the madness of what we're going through. So that's what our book is about. If you don't think we've written another New Age book about how we can all sing Kumbaya and resurrect justice tenderly, we have not. We have looked absolutely unsparingly at what's happening, unsparingly at the mystical reality of this global dark night. But in that gaze, we have discovered enormous divine truth, hope, joy, and energy. So Carolyn, sorry to take up the time. I just was getting wild with what Jim was saying.
Well, I'm so shocked that you would get wild, Andrew. That's just not like you. Yes. And I want to underscore the subtitle of our book, Radical Regeneration, Birthing the New Human in the Age of Extinction. And I want you to notice the paradox of that title, birthing amid extinction, potential extinction. That's what we're writing about. And in that paradox is an enormous lesson. And that lesson is that above all, at this time, we must hold the tension of opposites.
Right.
And stop the nonsense of it's either got to be fear or it's got to be love. I publish a daily news digest, and it includes news about the economy, the environment, world news. I've added a new section now on the daily Civil War report. I published a section on civil liberties, on culture, and a section at the end called Real Inspiration. So this morning, I started out with a bunch of gorgeous pictures of autumn. And then under that, I said, there is beauty and love in this darkness. Then I gave the terrible news, and down under inspiration, a quote from Rumi. You're not a drop in the ocean is a drop in you. And if I said that wrong, Andrew, please help me. What I want people to understand is that as we go through this dark night, we must do what Viktor Frankl did in Auschwitz, which I believe is one thing that allowed him to survive, which is to hold the tension of the opposites, to find love and joy and beauty in the smallest thing as he was going through hell. We're going to need that perspective because we have descended into hell and we're going through it very quickly. I don't think that a coup d'etat is about to happen. I believe it's already begun.
Absolutely.
And we saw this as we wrote Savage Grace in 2017. We were blown away by the victory of Trump in the 2016 election. And we said, my goodness, we have to write about this. We have to really focus on the goddess Kali and what she is trying to do to us and within us. And so we wrote some scenarios, from the mildest to the most severe. We are now entering the most severe. And if you want to, catch up on that, you can read our book, Savage Grace. It's all in there. And so we have decided to take this even further. And that is why we were compelled to write Radical Regeneration, Birthing the New Human in the Age of Extinction.
Thank you so much. This gives rise to, I think, a very important question about the nature of mysticism. I think oftentimes people in spirituality devalue what's going on in politics, and people in politics devalue what's going on in spirituality. And I think the beauty of the book, as I was reading it, and I was privileged to be given an early copy, and I wrote a little blurb for Andrew and
Thank
Carolyn,
you.
because I was so impressed with the book, is the way that you've brought together both ruthless realism about the world and sort of a sublime elegance about the spirit. And I think, Carolyn, the way you described what you did this morning, beautiful images of the fall. Nature's turning now toward the winter solstice. And then clear-eyed description of what's going in the world. And then the poetry of Rumi. That feels to me to be a beautiful exemplification of the kind of mysticism that brings the sacred and the profane together in a radical integration of opposites. So I'd love, maybe starting with you first, Carolyn, and then Andrew, talk to us about how you understand mysticism in a pretty crazy world.
Well, Andrew's really the expert on mysticism, but you know, the word mysticism is not mysterious. Well, it is. It really is related to mystery and mythology. And sometimes when we hear the word mysticism, we think, oh God, that is so abstract, and there's no practical application. Weren't these mystics all people who sat in the 13th century or before that and contemplated their navels? And what does that have to do with today, you know, the 21st century? What does it have to do with a world where we're on Zoom all day long? It is within that mystery that we find meaning. And I'd like to read the quote that is at the very beginning of our book by Charles Upton. He says, "The specific medicine for the shock of despair is the deeper shock of meaning." The specific medicine for the shock of despair is the deeper shock of meaning. And so right now, as sacred activists, we must marry the mystical with the activist. And through that process, we find meaning. And there may not be much that we can do about falling into a dictatorship. There wasn't much Viktor Frankl could do about being in Auschwitz. But what he did do that sustained him and allowed him to survive was to find meaning and purpose. And that is what is calling us, screaming at us in this moment, to marry the mystical with the activist and to find meaning and purpose.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Andrew?
There is a great secret at the core of all of the mystical traditions. And that is that humanity is destined to be divinized. This secret blazes at the heart of authentic Christianity. This secret blazes at the heart of Shaivism, of Vajrayana Buddhism, of Taoist alchemy, of the Zohar. And it is the secret that was transmitted electrically between Shams and Rumi. And this is an evolutionary secret. And in the last 100 years, we've had massive, grand, evolutionary, mystical figures like Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and Satprem and Jean Gebser, and my great teacher, Father Bede Griffiths, who have told us from their own inmost experience that what is going to happen on the earth is a massive shattering, which, if we don't understand its radical evolutionary purpose, could drive us crazy. But if we realize at the deepest level that this shattering, this death, is just as a individual dark night is the crucial gateway into the birth of the divine human in mystical reality. So the whole world now is in a massive mystical evolutionary crisis, and that this crisis is potentially not the end of humanity, but the birth canal of an embodied divine humanity, the ordained, terrifying crisis that will compel us, force us, cajole us, batter us, shake and make us tremble, so that we do the insanely hard work of collaborating with the evolutionary impulse through the dark night to let grace birth in us a wholly new level of divine consciousness, energy, hope, joy, and power. And coming together in that new level, we will be able to co-create and collaborate the building of a new world. My whole life is devoted to this evolutionary vision, because I am the disciple of a transfigured master, somebody who told me, sitting in a hut in India, very humbly, very simply, about this amazing process that is activated by the horror of the dark night. He'd been through a horrific dark night. He thought he was going to die. Instead, he was invaded by love, and this new process of the light entering in and bringing together heart, mind, soul, and body started to happen. And since that day, I have also experienced this process, been teaching it everywhere. And what I've brought into our book is this secret and the path to realize this secret. Because what I know for myself is that there is a thrilling and amazing opportunity in so extreme a dark night. Because if you can align to it and learn its lessons of humility and profound practice and opening to your evolutionary destiny and coming together in radical, humble, sacred activism, then out of the extremity of what we are living can be born a rugged, grounded, humble, illumined, embodied, divine human race. This is the testimony of Aurobindo. This is the testimony of Moses de Leon. This is the testimony hidden at the core of the Christian mystics. This is the great secret, and the time for the birthing of this tremendous secret has come. It's here. And everybody who knows anything about this secret at this moment is pouring out their knowledge to give the human race radical encouragement. Stay with this horror. Let it destroy your illusions. Trust grace. Let the pain birth a deeper, wilder, holier love. Align yourself with the evolutionary will of the Mother Father, and you will see what Rumi saw when he went through his dark night, what Kabir saw when he went through his dark night, what I have witnessed through going through a terrible 10-year dark night, that the clouds part, the sun comes up, you're filled with a new radiance and a new truth and a new energy, and you become more and more divinized and unified, humbly. This is not poetry. This is what is happening at the fundamental, mystical, realistic level in the world. And that's what our book is partly dedicated to giving you the skinny about this and the ways to connect with this right now in the core of your own real amazing lives. So, when people say you're connecting the mystical to the realist, I always want to scream with laughter. There's nothing more realistic than mysticism, because mysticism is the science of the real, the science of the absolute. And evolutionary mysticism is the fiercest, most rigorous science of all. And that's what we have been really working on from different angles in our own lives, Carolyn and I, and also related in the book to the latest discoveries in quantum physics, because something amazing is happening in the middle of this death that does offer us extraordinary invitations forward. And that is that the outer sciences and the inner sciences are now coming together and mutually illuminating each other. The inner sciences of the great mystical scientists who've discovered the path to divinization, and the outer sciences that are now discovering the astonishing collaborative nature of the universe in quantum physics. These two have come together at the moment of our greatest dereliction to offer us extraordinary inspiration, realistic inspiration, so that we realize what is the real. The real isn't just this madness and this chaos and this cruelty and this insanity. The real is also the eternal light crystallizing itself in a million forms and birthing ever new opportunities for expansive identity to those who are willing to do the work. That's also totally real. So let's get with the evolutionary program and let's do the work. Let's come together. Let's live in joy and sacrifice and humility, and let's go forward, even as everything burns, knowing that it's only when the phoenix burns away completely that the new phoenix can rise. And humanity rising is essentially the new phoenix of the divine human rising. It's time to get with God's evolutionary reality.
Thank you both. Excuse me. Thank you both. You know, this is what's coming up for me as you're both speaking is Ilya Prigogine and his notion of islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. And the point that he made as a Nobel laureate in chemistry, I think it was in 1996, 1997.
Yes.
Is that the coherence emerges out of its relationship with the chaos.
Exactly.
Coherence doesn't emerge in separation from the chaos. Coherence emerges out of a certain way of relating to the chaos. And that the extraordinary thing about the coherence is that even though it's smaller, the intensity of the coherence is so much more powerful than the centrifugal confusion of the chaos, that if it starts to absorb and transform more and more chaos, it actually reaches a certain critical mass, and the chaos then is elevated to a new level of coherence. So if I'm understanding what you're saying, both about the interface between the sacred and the secular, the mystical and the profane, and what you're saying, Andrew and Carolyn, about radical regeneration, it's actually our capacity to immerse ourselves in the jagged edges of the dark reality in which we find ourselves.
Exactly.
Like Carolyn, you were saying, Viktor Frankl did, is really amazing. And I'd love you to go into more detail, because Viktor Frankl, many of the people that died because they denied the reality. Other people died because they let the reality overcome them. But he survived because he found meaning.
Absolutely. That's the point.
He found meaning in that which was absurdly meaningless, nihilistically meaningless. And this is one reason, everyone, we wanted Carolyn and Andrew, because this is the nub. This is the nub. As the world gets more chaotic, we have to become more coherent, but we can't do it in separation from the chaos. We got to do it by the way in which we transform the chaos. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there through the filter of Prigogine, and love to have your comments on it, because I think this is such a it's the fulcrum. It's the fulcrum for our survival.
I believe that we have to really take the perspective of, we talk about in the book, the warrior and the midwife. So as we go into this coup d'etat, we have to have the perspective of the spiritual warrior, but also the perspective of the midwife who is birthing something.
Beautiful.
And so for me, I'm co-teaching a course right now with my colleague, Terry Chapman, called Sacred Odyssey, Ordeal and Opportunity Amid Unending Crises. And so one of the things we're focusing on, and that I focus on in all of my work, is practice. As you go into training as a warrior, or as you go into training as a midwife, you're taught how to do the job. And, the ultimate intention of all of this is the destruction of the small self and the growing and flourishing of the sacred self. But we have to have tools. And so we go into this fire and we hold the tension of the opposites. And sometimes we can't. Let's be realistic. Some people had to turn off the debate, and, do something nurturing for yourself as you're in the midst of this chaos. I'm fortunate I live near the mountains. I can go up and enjoy the colors. But whatever it is, soothe and love your soul, nurture yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but in a loving, compassionate way, and then get back into the fire. And what Franco was able to do was to see the meaning in every little thing and to appreciate the joy that was there. I mean, it's not like there was no joy in Auschwitz. The inmates would, get together and tell jokes once in a while, or they would do all kinds of crazy things to find some joy. And here he is sitting there with his friends and relatives, and his wife is being killed, and his, I believe another child is being killed, and many of his relatives perished in the Holocaust. He was able to find meaning, and it wasn't a big intellectual thing. It was from the heart. And so we train ourselves, we learn practices. Andrew, wrote a whole book on practices. I have written enormously in my books on practices. And so that's what we need, the tools, the practices to walk into this fire, holding the tension of the opposites. It's going to be really hard. And we need to nurture ourselves and love ourselves as much as we combat the evil that we are walking through.
Couldn't
Beautifully
be
put.
said.
Beautifully put.
I would just love to pick up what you were saying, Jim, because I think this is truly the key, what Prigionine discovered, and what mystics have always known. And it's the key to the dark night process. And it's the reason why any kind of denial or magical thinking is disastrous when a dark night manifests, because any kind of denial or magical thinking will actually prevent you from birthing your true self through the agony of letting your false self die. And there's an astonishing poem by Rumi which says this better than anybody's ever said it. And I'd love to just quote it, because this is what we are living, I think, at this, I know for myself at this moment. The grapes of my body can only become wine after the winemaker tramples me. I surrender my body like grapes to his trampling, so my inmost heart can blaze and dance with joy. And although the grapes go on sobbing blood and screaming, I cannot bear any more anguish. I cannot bear any more cruelty. The trampler stuffs cotton in his ears and says, "It is I who am the master of this work. You can deny me if you want. You have every excuse. But when, through my passion, you reach perfection, you will never be done praising my name. When you really study and integrate the extraordinary paradoxical wisdom of that poem, you have the map and the key to how to get through this evolutionary turmoil. The first two lines give you the law that you will never become the flowing wine of divine presence, divine energy, divine empowerment without being trampled, without having all of your concepts and petty smallnesses beaten away, trampled, destroyed. That's what all of the mystical systems know. But then the third line gives you the key to going through the process, which is what you were saying, Prigogine discovered. It's the surrender to this chaos, this extravagant suffering, the surrender to it, trusting that it comes from the alchemical depths of love itself, love herself, that it is a form of love's alchemy, knowing that through mystical truth and through respecting and honoring what the great mystics have told us. I surrender my body like grapes to the trampling, so my inmost heart can blaze and dance with joy, so that despite what's happening to the world and to you, through that surrender, through that trust, through that practice, through that incessant tender turning up in the core of your life, you can know what you will be fed: real, radical, causeless, purposeless joy. Wow. And then what he does is to give you the actual structure of what you're going to live through as you're expanded by grace to understand more and more and more of the new order that's being born out of this boiling chaos. You're going to become two voices inside yourself. One voice will be the human voice screaming, saying, I can't bear any more anguish, I can't bear any more cruelty, I can't bear any more Trump, I can't bear any more authoritarianism, I can't bear any more destruction of the environment. That's the human side, and you have to let that out. You have to be one with that, because that's going to break open your heart to new levels of love and compassion and passion of action. But you also hear increasingly, the more you practice, the more you align yourself with this mystery of the new order being born out of terrible disorder, the more you'll hear the voice of the evolutionary truth, which will say to you, I am the master of this work. You can deny me if you want. You have every excuse. It's horrific what you're going through. But when through my passion, you reach perfection, you'll never be done praising my name. When through enduring, trusting, being with, embracing this terrifying process, you become humble and receptive and loving enough to have grace irrigate you totally, something amazing will become real to you, and you will be aware ecstatically that you are being born into your human divinity through this death process. That's what Rumi is enshrining in that poem. That's what humanity is now living on a global scale. That's the great radical regeneration that's taking place. It's a terrifying process, but we have a map, and we have pioneers who've gone through this, and we have people on the earth who are radiating the rugged joy of the new humans. So let's get with this process and birth the new order.
And I would like to just add to that, we have a section in the book on planetary rite of passage. And it's another way of saying what Andrew is saying. And I'd like to just read a quote from Charles Eisenstein in his wonderful book, The Ascent of Humanity. And he says, just as a person often has to become very, very sick or experience a close brush with death in order to wake up to life, so it may also be necessary for the same thing to happen on a planetary level before we as a species wake up to the fraudulence of our dualistic conception of ourselves as separate from nature. When our collective survival is imminently, dramatically, and undeniably in danger, and only then, our present collective behaviors and relationships to the rest of life will cease to make sense. One of the things that has been helpful to me, and I've written quite a bit about it, is the whole rite of passage in terms of what we're experiencing right now. That we are going through a planetary initiation. And our number one job at this point is to realize that, to wake up to that, to respond to that. Oh, okay, so here I am taken out into the wilderness by the elders, and I have to go through this ordeal. And the purpose of that is so that I will reach down into myself and find the essence, the core of who I really am, that is far below and beyond my ego, so that I can come forth and become a new human being, be radically regenerated. You know,
Right.
the great authority on rite of passage, Mircea Eliade, said that the whole purpose of it was to create in the young person in the tribe a complete existential transformation. That's what this crisis is begging of us. And it's helpful to me personally as I go through my daily life and feel all this fear and anxiety and anger and uncertainty, to just think of myself as I am this initiate who's going through the experience. I'm being accompanied by the elders, you know, my spiritual supporters and my earthly friends and nature. And it is taking me through this existential transformation, this radical regeneration. And I've got to stay in the fire with it. I've got to allow the grapes of my body to be crushed. And also, that's not the whole story.
No.
And there's joy, and there's beauty, and there's love and friendship. And, you know, this is a very juicy time. It's a hell of a time to be alive, positively and negatively. You know, none of us signed up for this. But what a beautiful, potentially transformational and gorgeous time it can be.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You know, this leads to a question that came through the chat from Jenna Tantz. When you talk about existential transformation, she's asking the question, did you discover, both of you, that as you were doing the work of undoing the conditioning and error during your own dark nights, that you eventually push through and create new neural pathways, and then are able to stay at that capacity to hold the tension of the opposites because your nervous system has healed? Now, the importance of this question is the domain of embodiment.
That's it.
You know, oftentimes we think of politics out there and mysticism somehow, maybe it's in our third eye, but it's in our soul, which really isn't in our body, and it's sort of an awareness and so forth and so on. But, you know, if you think about the rites of passage, Carolyn, in all societies, it's deeply physical.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the something is not real until it's changed your cellular structure of your body.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to have both of you comment on the physical embodiment aspects of radical regeneration.
Well, I just like to say, and I may have more to say about this in a few moments, but I just like to say that this rite of passage is begging us to become fully embodied. We are an extremely disembodied culture, and that's because we're so separate from nature. Our last book was Saving Animals from Ourselves. And we talked about in depth in that book the embodiment of animals, how present they are, fully inhabiting their bodies. And isn't it interesting that right now with this pandemic, we're seeing physically, we're hearing the cry, I can't breathe. And isn't it interesting that politically and in terms of inequality and racial injustice, we're hearing, I can't breathe. And so one of the things that every initiation calls us to is deep embodiment. And so we have to feel those feelings, you know, and, you know, this whole thing about fear, you know, we get very wrapped up, and I think it's a very white and a very new age thing of, oh, you know, we don't want to be in fear. And it's almost like fear of the fear, you know, so much dread of the fear. Well, I'm sorry, but fear is a God-given animal emotion, right? And if we're going to be fully embodied, we're going to feel some fear. Doesn't mean we have to move in and redecorate and set up residence in it. It just means we're going to feel it, honor it, check it out in your body. Where is it? What is it trying to tell you? Because all of our emotions are gifts. And so that's what I have to say at the moment about embodiment. I'm sure more will come. Andrew, it's all yours.
The great secret at the heart of the mystical traditions is not about transcendence. It's not about floating off into the light. It's about incarnating the light,
Yes.
bringing the light down. I remember doing some amazing work with Banafsheh Sayad, and the line of Rumi that we loved the most is 3 words: love flows down. What the alchemists and the evolutionary mystics discovered is that there is a 3-part path. The first part, you separate from the senses and you have a direct knowledge of the light. You do the ascetic work of separating yourself from one way of seeing, and so that this other way of seeing can be born, which enables you to see the divine light and to recognize that you are in your essence one with that divine light consciousness. This isn't enlightenment. This is just the beginning of the process, because the great mystics of embodiment know that once that has been established, that knowledge of your fundamental deathless identity, what you then have to do is to bring the light down, bring it into your mind, bring it into your heart, work with it in the very cells of your body, so that the whole of you becomes increasingly one with the dazzling, empowering, unified force field of the light. And that process, that second process of descent, is what we are now in globally. Because there are 3 aspects of this terrifying process that are directly parallel to this process in alchemy and in evolutionary mysticism. The first is that we have to really understand that there's a huge temptation in our previous mystical awareness, a temptation to leave our reality behind and plunge into the light, to become addicts of transcendence. And we have to understand how dangerous that's been for us, because it's been meant we've dropped our bodies, our relationships, our responsibilities as citizens, how dangerous it's been for the world, because it's prevented us from being truly one in heartbroken and radiant love with the world, loving it and in absolutely celebrating it. That's the first thing. And all spiritual systems have to go through a revolution now to bring in the fullness of the vision and the wonder of the divine feminine, so that we have on the earth a mystical set of visions and knowledge which celebrate the sacred marriage, the marriage that's celebrated by Kabir when he says, my father is the absolute Godhead, my mother is the embodied Godhead, and I am their divine child, dancing for them both on their burning dance floor. A revolution which is a tantric revolution in celebration of the marriage, to empower people to arrive here in their fullness of divine presence. The second tremendous revolution that's happening on the planet is that this extreme dark night is healing our dissociation, our incredible lack of feeling, our lack of concern, our appalling lack of compassion, by shattering our hearts open by agony. That has to happen for the human race to have a chance of going forward, because as you all know, there is an enormous anomie installed in the human spirit, what Paul Levy calls wetiko, a soul sickness, that has robbed us of our deepest and most sacred power, which is the passion of compassion that is natural to our awakened heart. So one of the functions of this dark night is to take a sword of fire and plunge it into the heart and break the heart of humanity. Break it, shatter it, open it. Because if it continues to harden, it will just continue to initiate policies that will destroy it and a great deal of nature. And the third great gift of this crisis is a gift of togetherness in joy. We're not going to get through this, as so many of us have done our spiritual path in our own little way or vague activism. We'll only get through together in joy and energy, and in a fusion of deep sacred practice and radical action, that is sacred activism. So this crisis can only be overcome through a global revolution of embodied love in action. And we will either get with that program or we will die out. And more, seeing what's been happening in the world and the amazing response to the terrible death of George Floyd, and in what's arising now, even in the horror of what we're living, more and more I can see with my birth eyes this movement, this astonishing new movement of sacred activism rising at last. I've been waiting for this for 20 years in agony, but it's here. And here it is. So all of those three things are part of this immense adventure of embodiment that the human race is on. First of all, this reconsidering of our entire human purpose to make us children of the mother as well as the father, and so connected to the whole world in love. Secondly, to allow our appalling habits of dissociation to be seared clear of us by the pain, the agony, the terrible loss of illusion that we're going through. And thirdly, to realize we must come together in sacred action to birth, to have a hope in heaven of birthing the next level of our evolutionary destiny. But there are so many amazing human beings on the planet who know all these three and who are willing to risk everything. Be one of them.
Whew, thank you. Thank you. And Carolyn, did you have anything else that you wanted to say? You mentioned at the beginning that you might have a little bit more. So this is your chance.
On that particular question, not really at the moment.
Okay.
I was just thinking about, our friend Brian Swim, who's a wonderful physicist in the Bay Area. And we just mentioned his 10 Powers of the Universe DVD that he has. And one of those powers that all life forms have is the power of cataclysm. Every life form experiences cataclysm and a collapse. And, what he says about that is that our job right now is to move with that collapse.
Yes.
Industrial civilization is collapsing. And particularly the way of life, the philosophy that it was built on, that's collapsing, that's unraveling. And our work now is to go with that and not to resist it. This is where we experience the transformation, the existential transformation of this rite of passage. And that is not to say we love it and it's just the greatest thing to ever happen, but we allow it and we move with it. We surrender to it. Perhaps one of the most important words right now is surrender. Surrender to what is happening.
Thank you. Thank you both. This has been deep and marvelous and exhilarating and confronting and compassionate. And I thank you both for your time and the work that you've done in producing this extraordinary book, Radical Regeneration. Before I turn it back over to Kim for some final poetry, I think it's worth reading what Paul Coleman just put in the chat, because I think his little story both summarizes and sanctifies what both of you have been saying about this interface between the light and the darkness, the chaos and the coherence. He says, "A young woman walked with me for several months across the United States. She expected to be only walking during the day, but soon discovered that life as an earth walker also involved walking at night, something which she was at the beginning in fear of. One day she was asked by a reporter if she had any major realizations during her walk. She replied, 'Yes. Walking at night, I discovered that it was just the other part of the day.'" My friends, that's it. It's all one.
Yes.
And as Carolyn just said, ultimately it's submission. And embracing, as Andrew said, in every cell of our body, the reality of the night and the sublimity of the day. And that's the embodiment of the mystical in the real. So thank you, you both. I'm deeply honored and I feel graced by this conversation. I feel
We love
deeply
you, Jim.
graced. and
So
healed.
do we.
We
Kim.
feel so grateful.
Thank you.
Kim, give us some poetry.
Poem from the poet Goethe, translated by Robert Bly, called The Holy Longing, which I call to at this moment in each of us. Tell a wise person, or else keep silent. For those who do not understand us will mock us right away. I praise what is truly alive, what longs to be burned to death. In the calm waters of the love nights, where you were begotten, where you have begotten, a strange feeling comes over you as you watch the silent candle burning. Now you are no longer caught in your obsession with darkness. And a desire for higher lovemaking sweeps you upward. Distance does not make you falter. Now, arriving in magic, flying, and finally, insane for the light. You are the butterfly and you are gone. And so long as you have not experienced this, to die and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on this dark earth. Now you are no longer caught in your obsession with darkness and a desire for higher lovemaking sweeps you upward. Distance does not make you falter. Now, arriving in magic, flying, and finally insane for the light. You are the butterfly, and you are gone. And so long as you have not experienced this, to die and so to grow. And so long as you have not experienced this, to die and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on this dark earth. The grapes of my body can only become wine after the winemaker tramples me. I surrender my spirit like grapes to his trampling, so my innermost heart can blaze and dance with joy. Although the grapes go on weeping blood and sobbing, I cannot bear any more anguish, any more cruelty. The trampler stuffs cotton in his ears. I am not working in ignorance. You can deny me if you want. You have every excuse. But it is I who am master of this work. And when through my passion you reach perfection, you will never be done praising my name. Praise, my dear one. Nothing belongs to us. It's a poem by Wolfgang Goethe, translated by Robert Bly. A poem by Rumi, translated by Andrew Harvey. And a few words from Rainer Maria Rilke at the end, to a piece of music by Jamie Sieber and a goo called Reach In. Thank you.
Beautiful, Kim. Just beautiful. I think we've gone to the heart of the heart today, everyone. And it's only a shadow and an echo of what truly is, but it's pointing in a direction of deep profundity that if we can grasp, we will be redeemed. So Carolyn, Andrew, Kim, thank you all for a sublime session on radical regeneration. The book comes out soon, and it is a must read for any pilgrim on the path. Tomorrow, we will check back in, same time, same station, to Humanity Rising and Zoom at 5:00 p.m. Central European Time, where we're going to have two extraordinary women, Cindy Ford and Carolyn McDougall, talk to us about a whole world system design for the future. So Humanity Rising tomorrow, 5 o'clock Central European time. As every day we bring you pearls of wisdom as best as we can find them on the beach of our time. We had 2 extraordinary pearls today. And then Kim threw in a third. 3 pearls. Thank you all. See you tomorrow, everyone. Bye for now.